December 7, 1941. A lazy Sunday morning in paradise. On the tranquil island of Oahu, Hawaii, the sun was just beginning to warm the palm trees. Sailors and soldiers were waking up, some heading to breakfast, others to church, many still sleeping off a Saturday night in Honolulu. On the decks of the massive battleships moored in the harbor, the American flag was being raised, a daily ritual of peace. But thousands of miles away, and hundreds of feet in the air, a different reality was taking shape. An armada of steel, bearing the symbol of the rising sun, was closing in. 6 aircraft carriers, having slipped across the North Pacific in complete radio silence, were turning into the wind. Their mission, to deliver a devastating blow from which the United States might never recover. The world was holding its breath, and America was completely unaware that it was just minutes away from being plunged into the greatest conflict in human history. The plan was audacious, years in the making, and masterminded by one of Japan's most brilliant naval strategists, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. Yamamoto wasn't a warmonger by nature. In fact, he had studied at Harvard and served as a naval attaché in Washington, D.C. He understood America's industrial might better than most in the Japanese high command. He famously warned his superiors, "I can run wild for 6 months. After that, I have no expectation of success." But Japan's imperial ambitions in Asia had put it on a collision course with the United States. America had imposed a crippling oil embargo, a move designed to halt Japanese expansion. For Japan's military leaders, it was an act of economic warfare that left them with a choice: retreat in humiliation or risk everything on a single, decisive strike. They chose the latter, the target. The heart of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, nestled in Pearl Harbor. The Japanese task force, the Kido Butai, was a marvel of naval power. Its 6 carriers held over 400 aircraft torpedo bombers, dive bombers, and the nimble Zero fighters. For 10 days, this fleet battled treacherous seas, undetected by American intelligence. The level of secrecy was extraordinary. The ships maintained strict radio silence, even dumping their garbage overboard at night to avoid leaving a trail. To fool any onlookers, a dummy radio operator remained in Japanese waters, sending out routine messages to create the illusion that the fleet was still at home. On the morning of December 7th, the first wave of 183 planes took off from the carrier decks. The lead pilot, Mitsuo Fukita, looked down at the seemingly peaceful island below. He saw the American fleet arranged in neat rows, a perfect target. Believing total surprise had been achieved, he broadcast the now infamous code phrase, "Tora, Tora, Tora, Tiger, Tiger, Tiger." It was the signal that the surprise attack had been a success. Back on Oahu, the first signs of trouble were dismissed. At 6:45 a.m., a small American destroyer, the USS Ward, fired on and sank a Japanese midget submarine, trying to sneak into the harbor. The report was sent up the chain of command, but it was slow-moving and met with skepticism. Then, a little after 7 a.m., two Army privates at a brand-new experimenter station at Opana Point saw something incredible on their screen. A massive blip, a huge formation of aircraft approaching from the north. They were astounded. This was far larger than any flight they'd ever seen. They called their superior, a lieutenant who was new to the job. Tragically, he assumed it was a flight of American B-17 bombers expected from California that morning. He told them, "Don't worry about it. It was a catastrophic mistake." Those 2 privates were witnessing the first wave of the Japanese attack force. The final line of defense had failed. At 7:55 a.m., hell was unleashed. The first bombs fell on the airfields, aiming to destroy the American fighter planes before they could even get off the ground. The Japanese pilots were ruthlessly efficient, strafing the neatly parked aircraft, turning them into blazing pyres of twisted metal. Within minutes, America's air power on Oahu was crippled. Then, the attackers turned their attention to the main prize, Battleship Row. This was the heart of the harbor, where 7 of the Pacific Fleet's 9 battleships were moored side by side like sitting ducks. Torpedo bombers, specially fitted with wooden fins to handle the shallow harbor waters, swooped in low. Dive bombers screamed down from above. The USS Oklahoma was hit by multiple torpedoes almost immediately. It listed, rolled over, and capsized in less than 12 minutes, trapping over 400 men inside. Sailors who had been eating breakfast one moment were suddenly plunged into an upside-down world of darkness, rising water, and suffocating oil fumes. The chaos was absolute. Explosions tore through the air, sending geysers of water and shrapnel skyward. Anti-aircraft fire from the ships began to fill the sky, but it was disorganized and largely ineffective at first. On the USS West Virginia, Captain Mervyn Benyon was mortally wounded by shrapnel. But he refused to be moved, continuing to command his ship until he died. On the same ship, a mess attendant named Dory Miller, who had no training with heavy weapons, single-handedly manned a 50 caliber machine gun and fired at the enemy planes until his ammunition ran out, becoming one of the first heroes of the war. But the most devastating blow was yet to come. The USS Arizona, a behemoth of the fleet, was struck by an armor-piercing bomb. The bomb penetrated its forward decks and detonated in the main ammunition magazine. The resulting explosion was cataclysmic. The entire front section of the battleship was obliterated in a blinding flash, lifting the 33,000-ton ship out of the water. Over 1,177 of her crew were killed instantly, nearly half of the total American deaths that day. The Arizona sank to the harbor floor in just 9 minutes, becoming an eternal tomb for the men trapped within her fiery hull. While Battleship Row burned, the rest of the harbor was also under attack. The USS Nevada, the only battleship to get underway during the attack, made a heroic dash for the open sea. Its crew fought desperately to get the ship moving, providing a glimmer of hope amidst the destruction. But the Nevada became a prime target for the second wave of Japanese planes, fearing it would be sunk in the narrow channel, blocking the harbor entrance. Its captain made the difficult decision to beach it. It was a smart move that saved the ship and the harbor. The second wave, arriving around 9 a.m., continued to pound the surviving ships and airfields, but the American resistance was now much stiffer. The element of surprise was gone. After nearly 2 hours of relentless assault, the Japanese planes turned and headed back to their carriers. Fushida flew over the scene, assessing the damage. Below him, Pearl Harbor was a maelstrom of fire, smoke, and oil. He had accomplished his mission. In just under 2 hours, the Japanese had sunk or damaged 18 American ships, including 8 battleships. They had destroyed nearly 200 aircraft and damaged another 150. Most tragically, 2,403 Americans, sailors, soldiers, and civilians lost their lives. Another 1,178 were wounded. The Japanese losses were minimal, just 29 planes, 5 midget submarines, and 64 men. On paper, it was one of the most successful military strikes in history. Admiral Nagumo, the commander of the Japanese task force, decided against launching a third wave to destroy the harbor's fuel depots and repair facilities. Some strategists, including Fukita, argued for it, but Nagumo was risk-averse. He had achieved his primary objective of crippling the battleship fleet and feared losing his precious carriers to a counterattack. This decision would prove to be a crucial turning point. By leaving the fuel tanks and shipyards intact, he allowed Pearl Harbor to remain a functional naval base, enabling the U.S. to mount a recovery far faster than Japan had ever anticipated. Furthermore, the Japanese made another critical miscalculation. By sheer luck, all 3 of the U.S. Pacific Fleet's aircraft carriers, the Enterprise, the Lexington, and the Saratoga, were not in port that day. They were out at sea on missions. In the new age of naval warfare, aircraft carriers, not battleships, were the true capital ships. By missing them, Japan had failed to destroy America's most vital naval assets. The sleeping giant they had hoped to intimidate was not just awakened, it was enraged. The news of the attack spread across the United States like a shockwave, uniting a previously divided and isolationist country overnight. The debate over entering the war was over. The next day, President Franklin D. Roosevelt stood before Congress and delivered one of the most famous speeches in American history. He declared December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. With near unanimous consent, the United States declared war on Japan. A few days later, Germany and Italy, Japan's allies, declared war on the United States, and America was officially engulfed in the Second World War. The attack on Pearl Harbor was a tactical victory for Japan, but a strategic catastrophe. It failed to deliver the knockout blow Yamamoto had envisioned. Instead, it galvanized American resolve and unleashed the full force of its industrial and military might upon the Axis powers. The balance of power in the Pacific was indeed shifted, but not in the way Japan had hoped. The road ahead would be long and brutal, fought across the vast expanses of the Pacific Ocean, from the Coral Sea to Midway. From Guadalcanal to Iwo Jima, the memory of Pearl Harbor became a powerful rallying cry, fueling the determination that would ultimately lead to Allied victory. The wreckage of the USS Arizona still rests at the bottom of the harbor today, a solemn memorial to the lives lost and a permanent reminder of the day that changed the world forever. Thanks for watching. If you found this piece of history as compelling as we do, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the past. Let us know in the comments what other historical events you'd like us to cover.